No, I'm just going to throw this one in the mix of the presentation, and should nothing change, and for the current time, some tips for the injured worker. Probably every injured worker out there already knows this, and it's too late to change, but this is something that you should keep in mind, because it's going to be very important in determining the compensation and support for your injuries. My concern is the lack of candor that was provided to me involving assessment centers. W.S.I.B. presented it as something that would help me, and obviously it didn't. I found, in my course of assessment centers, I found an incompetent doctor that grossly misdiagnosed. And although W.S.I.B. brought up, well, that they had a concern about this doctor years later because of the number of complaints they've had, they must think he's doing a fabulous job because he's still there. And I can prove he's incompetent, and I can prove he misdiagnosed. And then the next opportunity I have at an assessment center, I met a doctor that couldn't read an MRI report. Now, I'm not sure what an injured worker is supposed to do with that. If W.S.I.B. won't accept an MRI, and they won't accept the diagnosis from a specialist, and they won't accept the diagnosis from a surgeon, I'm just not sure what else the injured worker can provide for W.S.I.B. But here are my tips on that assessment. Prior to any assessment scheduled, see your family physician, seek out a specialist, get necessary medical information, MRI, x-rays, and then get a diagnosis and prognosis, and if at all possible, measurements for motion restrictions from that specialist. Do not assume the assessment doctor is there to help you. He is not. He has no vested interest in your short-term or long-term health care. Ensure relevant information you bring with you, and it gets attached to their report. Do not assume the assessment doctor can read an x-ray or an MRI or understand the implications from visual evidence of your injuries. The second, mark off your own areas of injury. If the doctor seems to be determined to perform that task for you, ensure prior to you leaving you see that diagram and that all relevant areas of your concern and injury are marked off properly. And in preparation of your assessment, you can find a guide for the injured worker by the AMA, American Medical Association, and it's on the W.S.I.B. website. Of course, you have to do a bit of scrolling to find it. First, go to the W.S.I.B. website. Then go to Workers' Resources. Then go to Adjudicated Support Documents. And then go to Adjudicated Advice Documents. And then scroll down to Adjudicated Advice Permanent Impairment Now Ratings. There you will find in this guide, AMA states, an injured worker should have worked for 6 to 8 hours prior to attending the NEL assessment. And if the worker attends the NEL assessment without having used the extremity for a prolonged period of time, there is a distinct possibility that rating parameters such as decrease in ROM, range of motion, will be within normal limits. The resulting problem is that, according to the AMA guidelines, the NEL would be 0%. Now, who do you think that's a problem for, W.S.I.B. or the injured worker? But for the fact the assessment center lacks the capacity to read an MRI or X-ray and understand the implications from a visual affirmation of the injury of the worker, if not working or assessed in the morning, will suffer a punitive penalty. Hopefully, by following the first point, ultimately these assessment centers will be made redundant. Would like to hear from other injured workers. Has the AMA guide ever been pointed out to you by W.S.I.B., Office of the Worker Advisor, or even by your ARO? The answer is probably not, but I'm interested to hear back on that. And 4, leave nothing to chance. W.S.I.B. will not advise you of your benefit entitlements. You need to do a lot of research, whether it's through a website or contacting others, in order to find out what W.S.I.B.'s obligations are to you.